Our next presenter joins us from the United Kingdom. Mark Blaney is the author of Your First Job. Mark will share 3 tips to help start fast in your first job. He will remind you that you have to think about providing your company a return on your salary. His 3 tips will help you understand your leadership role and how to manage your first 90 days. Writing and helping grads is a passion. Mark generates his real income from a series of companies he founded and manages. Check the Grad Career Festival website for additional information on Mark's presentation and bio, as well as his contact information. A warm welcome across the pond to Mark Blaney.
Hello, and thank you all for that, and thank you for joining me for this Grad Career Fest presentation. Now, there's lots of advice out there about how to choose a career, crafting the perfect resume, techniques to wow them at interview, all the things that you're going to need to help you get that job that you want, which is going to be in competition with the other 2 million or so graduates across the US in your year. So in this particular Grad Career Fest presentation, I'm not going to talk about any of that. Instead, I'm going to talk about the business of you. Now, you're going to put a lot of effort into getting your first post. So I want to ask you a question, which is, how much thought have you given to what you're going to need to do to make a success of that job once you've got it, to help you get to where you want to be in your career? What are you going to need to do to make a success of it on day 1, week 1, month 1, year 1? In short, how are you going to make that job work for you and your career and get you to where you want to be? Now, as you've heard, I'm Mark Blaney. I'm speaking to you from over here in the UK. You're all graduates, so I'm guessing you all learnt to read quite a while ago. And so I'm not going to repeat what's on the slide about who I am. More importantly, I want to talk to you a little bit about why I'm here talking to you today and why I wrote my book, Your First Job. Because it came out of talking to a real person. It came out of talking to a graduate who was in their first job. They joined a professional firm and they were about 3 or 4 months in. And I was talking to them, and frankly, they were drowning. What they were finding was that they'd taken a master's degree in performing arts. They'd done so from a really top university. But what they found was it just hadn't equipped them with the skills and techniques they needed to be able to cope with dealing with the work and the people involved in a busy office environment. Well, I mean, who would have guessed that? So Your First Job, my book, came out of providing them with some fundamental tools to help them with managing their work, their boss, their co-workers, and the sorts of situations they were finding they had to deal with. So it grew over a year into something that I then converted into a book, because I thought they probably aren't the only ones suffering from this sort of problem. Now, before we go any further, I want to thank you for choosing to watch my video as part of the Grad Career Festival. Now, I appreciate your time, so I want to let you know at the outset that this presentation is going to pass the old, what I call the old 5-finger test. What's in this for you? As we go through my 3 top tips, I'm going to deliver 3 things which I hope will be of value to you. Firstly, I want to show you how and why work is going to be very different from education. And I want to talk to you about the critical mindset change that you're going to need to adopt. Secondly, I want to share with you what I believe is the secret to a successful career. And thirdly, I'm going to tell you how to survive the crisis you're likely to encounter sometime in your first year. And to make sure that I do deliver, I'm going to flag each of these up in red as we get to them in my slides. But before we go any further, a quick extra free bit of advice. Do you see the note at the bottom of my slide? All the images used in this presentation have been properly licensed through a pictures agency. And I raise this because I come across professionals time and time again who don't do that and are using images that they've just copied off the internet. Just because something's online doesn't mean it's free to use. So always make sure you've got the proper permissions for anything you copy or use. You really don't want to get your employer being sued by Getty Images because you've used one of their images without copyright. It's not a good career move. So let's get started with my 3 top tips, and I will crack on through them so that we have plenty of time for questions at the end. So my first top tip: whatever the job title, whatever it said on the advert, you have been hired as a manager. Sorry, did nobody tell you that? You're being hired as a manager. And you're going to need to take responsibility for managing from day one. My second top tip is that you need to manage what I call business of you. Again, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but the stark truth is that by and large, out in the big wide world, you need to work on the basis that it's not all about you. I spoke to a recent graduate a couple of weeks ago, and the way he described his experience was quite blunt. What he told me was, once you're out at work, nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about you. That's fairly sad, really. But I think if you take it that nobody cares about you and your career, except for one person, and that's you, then you won't go far wrong. And to make a success of the business of you, your career, you need to take responsibility for managing it as a business from day one. And my third top tip is even simpler. Don't panic. You may have heard of a thing called imposter syndrome. It's the feeling that you are faking it or unable to do the job. You don't have the skills and you're bound to be unmasked as soon as they find out and then fired sooner or later, probably sooner. Now, this is something that many people suffer from throughout their careers as they ascend each ladder in their organisation. But it often strikes very early in new starters. So we're going to deal with this specifically today as well. So those are the 3 top tips I'm going to be talking about. So let's get into them in a bit more detail. Top tip number 1, you have been hired as a manager. You'll probably already have noticed a bit of a theme emerging in the first 2 of my top tips about taking responsibility. Whatever the job or job title, you will be expected to be managing from day one. So you need to be learning right from the outset. Now, to help with this, First Job is a free download that's available either from the link here at the Grad Career Festival or from my website, www.thewordpress.com. Now, this is a free first month survival guide. It has a checklist of do's and don'ts. So whatever else you do as a result of this presentation, I'd encourage you to just grab that as a free copy, and I hope it helps. But let me come back to it. So what do I mean about being hired as a manager? Well, when you think about it, whatever your job, there are going to be a lot of things you're going to need to manage from the outset. To touch on just some of the most obvious, you're going to need to organize yourself and your work. At its most basic, you're going to need to ensure that you're there where you're supposed to be working on time, wearing the right clothes that they expect you to wear, and knowing what you're being asked to do. In respect to the work you get, you're going to need to prioritize it, judge what's urgent, what's important, what's both, and what's neither. You're going to need to manage your time. You're going to need to organize your to-do list to make sure you cover off what needs to be done. And you need to value your time and learn to guard it so you can concentrate on what's urgent or important by saying no when needed. And saying no includes sometimes saying no to your boss. Now, how scary is an idea is that? Which brings us on to the need to manage something else, and that's your relationships with people. The people you work with, your boss, your co-workers, And that might go more widely into customers, suppliers, or even the public. The list can go on. These are all people where you'll need to work on managing your relationships. So how much thought and effort do you think you're going to need to put into organizing and managing these things to become effective at work? Because to be valued at work, your employer wants you to be an effective employee that's contributing. And that means managing rather than having to be managed all the time. So my point is, you've been hired as a manager of yourself to start with, to take responsibility for this from the outset. The more you do so, the better you'll get on, the more you'll be valued. So, tip number 2. You need to manage the business of you. Now, do you want a multi-million-dollar business? Well, you've actually got one, and it's you. I did a bit of research in preparing for this, and according to the latest US Department of Labor statistics I could find, the average bachelor's degree graduate's earnings in full-time employment once they turn 25 are $64,074 a year. Now, when I do the mathematics, that means over a 40-year working life in full-time employment, the business of you is actually going to pull in excess of $2.5 million. So what is your plan for this multi-million-dollar business? How are you going to make it a success? Right from the outset. What mindset and approach do you need to make the business of you successful right from the start? Now, this, as I said, if you go back to nobody cares except for one person, the one person who should and will care about this is you. So you need to take responsibility for it. There's a lot of advice and careers advice out there about all the things you need to do to be managing your career from the outset, covering all sorts of things, from managing a professional social media profile to how you go about developing your network. So get out there and read that advice and use it. But I actually want to touch on something I think is even more fundamental, which is the first of my red lines. And this is the complete change of focus that you need to recognize. Now, work is different. Now, on an intellectual level, I guess saying that work is going to be different from education won't come as a surprise. But there is a fundamental shift in how things operate that you really do need to appreciate. The way I put it is, as a student, it has been all about you. Education has been designed to deliver things, skills, knowledge to you. You think about it, teachers are there to teach you. Lectures are there to inform you. Tuition is there to prepare you for exams. It is set up. I know there's academic and research and all the rest of it, but the education part of education is set up to serve you. And if you join a firm with a very well-structured entry training program, it may at first seem very similar in some respects. But don't be fooled. Because fundamentally, as an employee, work is designed so you deliver things, services, support, etc. to others. It's set up for you to serve others. It's not all about you. Now that's a significant shift in expectations and focus. It's a complete reversal, in fact. It's a reversal from education being seen set up to serve you, to work being set up for you to serve others. And I think you really do need to get your head around that as quickly as possible if you're going to make a success of work in your career, because it has implications for being proactive about how you manage and how you deliver things to people. So, now, my day job is in business restructuring. Essentially what that means is I go out and I look to buy businesses that have gone bust or are in the process of going bust to see if they can be turned around, restructured or broken up and sold. So let me tell you a little story. A number of years ago now, a colleague and I bought a business in the automotive sector as a turnaround play. one of its customers was responsible for about 70% of the sales of the business. So 70% of what we did went into one customer. And all of this particular customer's suppliers all ranked, measured and ranked very publicly on two metrics. When I say publicly, those metrics were shared across all their suppliers so everybody could see how everybody else was doing. And the two metrics they used were a thing called OTIF, O-T-I-F. And OTIF measured the percentage of deliveries we made which were on time and in full, O-T-I-F, on time and full. The second metric was a thing called PPM, which stood for parts per million. And that represented the percentage of goods delivered which were wrong. Because there's not much point delivering stuff on time and in full if it's the wrong stuff or if it's defective. And a week after buying this business, my colleague and I, we were summoned to what was described as a main offenders meeting by the customer's purchasing director, which meant we had to go and visit them in Germany, where we were told two things. Firstly, we were their worst supplier by far on these metrics. And secondly, what were we going to do about it? Because if we didn't, we wouldn't be supplying them. And bear in mind, these were 70% of our customer base. Now, the point of that story is I'm talking about the business of you. And I think if you want to make a success of the business of you, you need to do what any business does, and that's focus on satisfying your customers. So who are the business of you's customers when you join your first job? They are your boss and your co-workers. These are the people who will be relying on you, producing your work on time, in full, and delivering it correctly, so that they can then do what they need to do. So my second piece of valuable advice to you, the secret of a successful career, it is you succeed by serving others. So as far as your customers are concerned, when you are the business of you starting on that first job, what that means is figuring out what do your customers, your boss, your co-workers want, how do they want it, and then deliver it on time, in full, and right. Succeed by serving others, figure out what they want, how they want it, deliver it. That will get you a long way. And my third top tip is simply don't panic. So here's my third piece of what is hopefully valuable. It's how to survive your first confidence crisis. Now, going back to the graduate I was speaking to start all of this, picture the scene. They're a few months in. They're past the stage where people were being nice to them as a newbie, showing them where the coffee machine was, how to operate the photocopier. And now they were having work dumped on their desk by people that they felt they didn't know how to do, by all sorts of people who all seem to have different wants, deadlines, need things doing at different times. Now, if you're in that situation, pretty soon you end up thinking, I can't do this, I don't know what to do, I haven't got the skills, it's all going to go wrong, and just as soon as they notice, I'm going to get fired. Well, the first bit of good news is you're not alone. It's a very, very common issue. It's a very common feeling. So don't panic, relax around it. And my simple message is don't panic. The reason I say that is that hiring costs time and it costs money, lots of it. It means making a business case up the line to the bosses, to the finance people, that there is a requirement for somebody to be employed, there is work to be done that justifies the investment in a new person. It means finding a budget to pay for them. It means finding a budget to pay for the recruiting activity. Nobody recruits for fun. Your employer will have spent a lot of effort on specifying the job, advertising, screening resumes, and interviewing in order to have selected you from the almost 2 million US graduates in your year. Now that tells you something. Firstly, it tells you they've got a job which needs doing. Secondly, they're invested. They've spent time and money. People's reputation and judgment have been put on the line in terms of choosing you. They've committed. So they're going to want to make it work. They'll want to give you the support you need so they can show that they've made the right choice. And of course, they also want to avoid having to go and do it all again if it doesn't work out. You know, I said a little while ago that nobody cares about you? Well, don't get your hopes up. Generally, they don't. But in this case, they will care about making it work because it's in their interest to do so. And thirdly, they had a view as to what they wanted in the person to do this job. And spoiler alert, usually it wasn't your skills. I'll repeat that. The likelihood is you have not been hired for your skills, full stop. There are three things recruiters can look for in hiring. The first is aptitude, your natural abilities in relation to the job's tasks. And personally, I have the hand-eye coordination of a sack of cement. So any job that requires good hand-eye coordination, I should be ruled out from the start. The second is attitude, your behavior towards the task. Are you somebody, for example, who will follow through on a task conscientiously, or are you somebody who requires constant stimulation? Different jobs require different attitudes. And thirdly, there are your skills, your technical ability to do the tasks. Now, when hiring a new starter straight from college, the assumption is often that you'll have very low or even no technical skills for the job. Instead, the approach is usually one of screen for aptitude, hire for attitude, train for skills. Screen for aptitude, do they have the natural abilities required to respect this job? Hire for attitude, do they have the right mindset? And then you can train them the technical skills they need to actually do the job. I started my career in accountancy, and before that I'd done a degree in politics. On day one, I couldn't have told you the difference between a debit and a credit, but it didn't matter. PwC, who hired me, didn't expect me to know it. They expected to train me in the skills I needed to do the job. So when your employer hired you, they knew what the job was. They knew what aptitude and attitudes they were looking for. So have faith in their judgment. They weren't looking for your skills. They expected to train you in those. And they know far more about what they wanted in somebody to do that job than you do. So stick with it. So, in summary, my three top tips are, firstly, whatever the job, you're going to have a lot to manage, starting with yourself. So look to actively manage and be seen to be actively managing yourself from day one. Secondly, manage the business of you. Treat you as a business. It's up to you to make the most of it. Remember that work requires this very different mindset. Education is focused on delivering things to you. Work is focused on you delivering things to others. To make the business of you a success, think of yourself as a business. Think of your boss and your workers as your customers, and serve your customers well. Find out what they want and deliver it on time, in full, right. And thirdly, if you feel you're struggling or feel you lack the skills for the job, don't panic. Your employer is heavily invested in you and will be motivated to make it work. And they won't usually have hired you for your skills. They will have been looking at and been happy with your aptitude and attitude when they recruited you. So, well, I hope you found that useful, or at least thought-provoking. To get you started after this webinar, you've firstly, as I've already said, you can download the free first month survival guide called First Job. You can follow the link that I believe should be under the grad career fest presentation here, or you can visit my website. The URL is at the bottom of the screen there. It's at www.theworkpress.com. So please do that. It's free. Hopefully it'll be useful. Secondly, I have recently started a free podcast series called Hacking Work, which is available on iTunes. I've only uploaded a few things to it so far, but we'll be adding to it as we go. So please do subscribe to that to listen to podcasts as I release them. That'll be useful. And of course, there's always my book. I've set out my advice on managing everything from your inbox to your boss and more, as well as some of the lessons I've learned from my mistakes over the years. I'm a great believer that you can learn from mistakes, so you might as well learn from mine. If it helps you avoid yours, that's great. So that book, it's available on Amazon. I think the Kindle is currently 99 cents, whatever, so please do have a look at that. So finally, good luck with your careers, wherever they take you. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn to let me know how you get on. I've got my LinkedIn URL up there on the screen. So all the best. Thank you for listening to me. I hope you enjoyed it. So Don, back to you. I think we have some questions.
Absolutely. Lots of questions here. Mark, thanks for sharing insights in how to transition into our first job. It's probably the largest transition anyone will ever make, to leave from the comfort of a academic environment where you report to a professor who will not have the same kind of expectations or demands that a boss will have. So you've laid out some really good ideas and suggestions in your 3 tips. And the first question, Mark, that's coming up, it relates to students and grads trying to think like a manager. Many assume that management will tell them what to do. So, the idea is, well, I'm here, what am I supposed to do? And there's that wait and see kind of deal. What can students and graduates do to be more proactive, to look for things that management may want done so that they're viewed as a go-getter?
Well, I think first and foremost, ask. As I say, employers are not expecting you to join fully formed with the skills to do the job. There is an expectation that you will need to learn. So I think you need to take advantage of that, certainly in your early days. So one of my key bits of advice to people is quite simply write everything down and keep asking questions. Now, people are very happy to help somebody who's new. If you are keen and show that you're looking to try and understand how to do things, people are very happy to help and explain the first time round. What really irritates them is if somebody is coming around asking the same question for about the 6th or 7th time, because what that tells the person being asked is that their time isn't being respected. So I think you want to go out, you want to ask questions, you want to not be afraid of your newness and the fact you need to learn, demonstrate you need to learn, ask people for help, they will be very glad to give it, but give them the respect that you are writing down what they say, whether physically in a book or on an app or whatever, so that, you've been told once and learn, or possibly twice if it's complicated. So go out and show that you're taking responsibility for your learning by A, asking, and B, demonstrating you're taking and paying attention to what you're being told. That gets you off on a very good foot, I think.
Good advice. Now, what can a student do to begin to connect with a mentor? Who do they go to within the company that they're starting to build a relationship where they can get some feedback? How do they approach them? Who is that kind of person? And what should their relationship be with a mentor?
That's a very interesting question. I think I'd challenge part of the first part of it in that it might not be somebody in their business. Certainly in the first instance, it's probably not their immediate boss, because the boss has got responsibilities, has got demands, etc., and that can be a difficult thing to juggle with mentoring. So I think you're probably going to want somebody who isn't a line manager. You might ask your boss to suggest somebody, and you might then get put in touch with, or asked to be put in touch with, perhaps a more experienced colleague to whom you don't have a straight line reporting responsibility. The other alternative, of course, is always somebody outside of the business. If you can find somebody who's got some experience in business outside the business, they may be a sensible person, because you can then discuss a wide range of things, knowing that it's not going to be taken or doesn't have an impact on your working environment. Obviously, there is then an issue in terms of business confidentiality. So I would have thought the first instance, going to your boss or the person you're reporting to directly and saying, I'd quite like a mentor, somebody who can help me make sure I'm doing the right things without bothering you all the time, and give me that steer, and get them to find you somebody who is an experienced, well-respected person within the organization, is probably quite a good route.
Makes sense. Now, what does a mentor expect of the mentee? The mentor is there to, in my view, is there to help you think through problems. So they expect you to be taking responsibility for your own life and development. They are there to be a sounding board to discuss things with. I joined a mentoring scheme a long time ago over here in England, and they used to have a motto which went something along the lines that a consultant is there to answer your questions and a mentor is there to question your answers. So a mentor is there to challenge you about what you're thinking and how you're operating and your decisions, and very much be this sounding board. They are not there to sort your problems out for you. It's an interesting relationship. It's one that grows up with people over time. It has to be one of real trust. If you're going to be able to want to talk very openly with your mentor about the things that are issues for you, and you're going to need to trust them and how they will deal with that. And they're going to need to trust you that you're not going to be wasting their time. So it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, I have had a couple of mentors over my time, which have grown up naturally from relationships with more senior people that I've worked with. Excellent. So another question, you started out talking about, we want to really focus today on what's in it for the grad, right? This is a benefit-oriented event. And so from your perspective, what's in it for the grad to manage the business of you?
Well, best will in the world. Again, sorry to break it to people, but the likelihood is you're going to have a working life of somewhere between 40 and 50 years. Longer, because lifespans are extending. If you're going to be working for 40 to 50 years, strikes me you're probably going to want to do something you find rewarding, interesting, engaging, because signing up to do something for 40 or 50 years that you find boring, unrewarding, etc., is not the route to happiness. So I think taking responsibility for what you want to do, where you want to get to, what you need to do to get there, and going for it is in your own interests. And it will make you a more productive and as far as the employer is concerned, it will make you a more productive and employee that adds to the bottom line, the more valuable employee. But it's your life. Take responsibility for it and go for it.
Makes a lot of sense. So what's the best way for a new employee to show a manager that they do have managerial skills and an interest in advancement into more responsibility?
The simple answer is do it. If you're starting work in an organisation as a new employee, people are going to be looking at you, and new employees into an organisation, to start with, are essentially a drag. They are not productive. In fact, they are often unproductive in that they require quite a lot of management time to organize, to help, to train, etc. It takes a while, and it can take quite a long time before the new hire becomes a productive employee that is actually adding positively to the bottom line of the business. Now, the faster you get to that point, the more you're going to shine. So if you think that, if you imagine an employer hires 2 people, and at the end of 6 months, one of those people is performing. They've got their job nailed, they're organized. You know that if you give them something to do, it gets done, it's done right, it's done on time, it's delivered, and they're ready and waiting for the next piece of work. And the other person is somebody that still can't really work the photocopier, is still needs nursemaiding, still needs their hand-holding, still needs organizing, still needs somebody to manage their work for them and tell them what to do and in what order. Which of those is the more valued employee at 6 months? Which of those do you think is going to be looked at as management potential going forward? I know which one I'd choose.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about attitude. What kind of attitude do I need to bring to work every day as a new employee?
Well, there are a lot of things you can do to demonstrate good attitude, and one of the first is just turning up on time is quite a good one. Your control. But it's about having an enthusiasm for getting on and learning, I think, really. You are in a learning mode as you kick off into an employment situation, and you can sit back. You can be in learning mode because I'm going to sit back and wait for people to tell me to do things, or you can be in learning mode that I'm going to go out and find what I need to know. So going out and finding what you need to know, I think, is demonstrating proactivity and will be seen to be positive. I did have a colleague. We did a turnaround, and I was speaking to one of my colleagues, and he had a regime. He used to drive there in the morning, and he said, well, I'm a director of this business. When I walk in the door, the staff are going to be looking at me, and they're going to be taking their cues from my behaviour. So he had this routine where he would stop his car a bit down the road from the factory, and he would say to himself, right, smile, confidence. He would then drive into the car park with his game face on and step out of the car with confidence and walk through because he knew people would be looking at him. Get your game face on. Think about what impression you're going to be giving to people around you when you're working and when you're walking through that front door. So smile. Engage with people. I mean, the other thing I would say is that work is a social environment. You're going to spend quite a lot of time with people, so you need to manage the social aspect of that with them, engage with them, become part of their little community. The other thing I would say in terms of differences from education is that community you are joining at the bottom. You'll have come out at the top of education, you're joining at the bottom where you're working. And you're going to be mixing with a large number of people who will come from very different backgrounds, very different ages, very different viewpoints, occupations, etc. So you'll be going into a situation where there'll be quite a lot of different viewpoints and people that you've got to deal with. And you need to manage that quite carefully. The last thing any employer wants is an employee coming on board who then starts to cause disruption or grief in terms of how they engage with other members of staff.
Let's go back to our guest career experts.